Welcome to OSHA General Safety Orientation brought to you by Mountain Associates. The material in this video is taken from the Occupational Health and Safety Administration known as OSHA. This video is an overview of the regulations applicable to the general industry. OSHA was established in 1971 as a result of the William Steiger Act of 1970 to help protect workers on the job. OSHA is part of the United Department of Labor. OSHA states as part of the General Duty Clause that employers furnish a working place free of recognized hazards that could cause death or physical harm to its employees, and that the employer complies with all regulations and standards associated with this act. The first standard we will cover is 29 CFR 1903. This covers inspections, citations, and proposed penalties. Under this regulation, it is required that employers post notices and posters. Posters include those such as workers' compensation or employees' rights. When dealing with inspections, an OSHA representative may inspect your facility during any working hour. If visited, it may be requested they show credentials upon entering your workplace. Inspections are unscheduled, may be at any time throughout the year. When dealing with inspections, an OSHA representative may inspect your facility during any working hour. If visited, it may be requested they show a badge upon entering your workplace. Inspections are unscheduled, may be at any time throughout the year. Citations. OSHA can cite any workplace hazard that has an imminent danger, meaning that the practice can result in death or serious injury. In addition to any imminent danger, citations are written for non-compliance with regulations as well as anything that is considered by the inspector unsafe. After an inspection, if there are citations, the area director of OSHA shall notify the employer by mail or in person with a report containing citations, proposed penalties, and fines. Upon receiving this, the citations must be posted where employees can see and must be kept there for at least 3 working days or until the abatement period is completed, whichever is later. Abatement means action by an employer to comply with the cited standard or regulation or to eliminate a recognized hazard identified by OSHA during an inspection. An abatement must be documented and reported to the regional OSHA agency. Record keeping and reporting. 1904 outlines the requirements for record keeping and reporting of injuries and illnesses. Record keeping. If your company had 10 or fewer employees at the time during the last calendar year, you do not need to keep OSHA injury and illness records unless OSHA or the BLS informs you in writing that you must keep records. However, it is required all employers covered by the Act must report to OSHA any workplace incident that results in a fatality or the hospital. There is recording criteria for fatalities, injuries, and illnesses. The general recording criteria is that an incident must result in death, days away from work, restricted work or job transfer, medical treatment beyond first aid, loss of consciousness, and a significant injury or illness diagnosed by a licensed physician or healthcare professional. You must also consider if the incident is considered work-related or not. It is work-related if an event or exposure to the work environment either caused or contributed to the resulting condition or significantly aggravated a pre-existing injury or illness. Work-relatedness is presumed for injuries and illnesses resulting from events or exposures occurring in the work environment. To record injuries and illnesses, they must be documented on OSHA 301 and 300 forms within 7 days of the recordable incident. Anyone responsible for record keeping and reporting will need read and sign off on OSHA document 3245. On the 300 form or log of work-related injuries and illnesses, it is a log of all work-related incidents. Both of these must be kept up to date. Lastly, after the end of each year, the sum is to be totaled and documented on the OSHA Form 300A form. It is a log of all injuries from the year and must be posted where employees can see it from February 1st to April 30th. Record keeping and reporting injuries and illnesses. If your company had 10 or fewer employees at all times during the last calendar year, you do not need to keep OSHA injury and illness records unless OSHA or the BLS informs you in writing that you must keep these records under 1904-41 or 1904-42. However, as required by 1904-39, all employers covered by the OSHA Act must report to OSHA any workplace incident that results in a fatality or the hospitalization of 3 or more employees. Individual employees will be trained on the subject matter by reviewing and signing off on OSHA document 3245. Reporting. If there is ever a situation where there are multiple hospitalizations of 3 or more employees or workplace fatalities, you must report to OSHA. This must be done within 8 hours either orally over the phone or in person. You must state your establishment name, incident location, the time of the incident, number of fatalities or hospitalizations, the names of the employees, your contact information, and a brief description of the incident. Another form of reporting to OSHA is the OSHA survey that is requested by Bureau Labor Statistics or BLS. No matter if you are exempt or not, if you receive a data request from the BLS, you must complete it and send it back. Now we will get into Part 1910, which covers all of the occupational safety and health standards. Occupational Safety and Health Standard List. Subpart A will cover purpose and scope and definitions. Subpart B will cover construction work, shipyard employment, longshoring and marine terminals, effective dates, changes in established federal standards, and special provisions for air contaminants. Subpart D will cover general requirements, guarding floor and wall openings and holes, fixed industrial stairs, portable wood ladders, portable metal ladders, fixed ladders, safety requirements for scaffolding, manually propelled mobile ladder stands and scaffolds, and other working surfaces. Subpart E will cover compliance with alternate exit route codes, design and construction requirements for exit routes, maintenance, safeguards, and operational features for exit routes, emergency action plans, and fire prevention plans. Subpart F will cover powered platforms for building maintenance, vehicle-mounted elevating and rotating work platforms, and man lifts. Subpart G will cover ventilation, occupational noise exposure, non-ionizing radiation, and effective dates. Subpart H will cover compressed gases, acetylene, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrous oxide, flammable and combustible liquids, spray finishing using flammable and combustible materials, explosive and blasting agents, storage and handling of liquefied petroleum gases, storage and handling of anhydrous ammonia, and process safety management of highly hazardous chemicals. Subpart I will cover eye, respiratory, head, and foot protection, electrical protective equipment, and hand protection. Subpart J will cover sanitation, temporary labor camps, non-water carriage disposal systems, safety color code for marking physical hazards, specifications for accident prevention signs and tags, permit required confined spaces, and the control of hazardous energy. Subpart K will cover medical services and first aid. Subpart L will cover fire brigades, portable fire extinguishers, standpipe and hose systems, automatic sprinkler systems, fixed extinguishing systems general, fixed extinguishing systems dry chemical, fixed extinguishing systems gaseous agent, fixed extinguishing systems water spray and foam, fire detection systems, and employee alarm systems. Subpart M will cover air receivers. Subpart N will cover handling materials general, servicing multi-piece and single-piece rim wheels, powered industrial trucks, overhead and gantry cranes, crawler, locomotive, and truck cranes, derricks, helicopters, and slings. Subpart O will cover general requirements for all machines, woodworking machinery requirements, abrasive wheel machinery, mills and calendars in the rubber and plastic industries, mechanical power presses, forging machines, and mechanical power transmission apparatus. Subpart P will cover hand and portable powered tools and equipment general, guard of portable powered tools, other portable tools and equipment. Subpart Q will cover oxygen fuel gas welding and cutting, arc welding and cutting, and resistance welding. Subpart R will cover pulp, paper, and paperboard mills, textiles, bakery equipment, laundry machinery and operations, sawmills, logging operations, telecommunications, electric power generation, transmission, and distribution, and grain handling facilities. Subpart S will cover electric utilization systems, wiring design and protection, wiring methods, components, and equipment for general use, specific purpose equipment and installations, hazardous classified locations, and special systems. Subpart T will cover qualifications of dive team, safe practices manual, pre-dive procedures, procedures during dive, post-dive procedures, scuba diving, surface supplied air diving, mixed gas diving, live boating, equipment, and record-keeping requirements. And Subpart Z will cover a multitude of toxic and hazardous substances. Let's get into the specifics of these regulations. Walking working surfaces. This standard applies to any working surface that you may come across in the workplace. This standard applies to any working surface that you may come across in the workplace. Some general requirements are first off, maintaining good housekeeping. All working surfaces must be kept clean and sanitary and free of protruding nails, splinters, holes, and loose boards. The working condition also must be kept as dry as possible. There must always be sufficient room for aisles and passageways and must be appropriately marked. For every working surface, it must bear a label stating the maximum load capacity of that surface. Guarding floor and wall openings and holes. This section covers protection of floor openings, wall openings, and holes, and the requirements for stairway railings and guards. Fixed industrial stairs. This section covers stairs strength and width, railings and handrails, and clearance. Ladder safety. Portable wood and metal ladders. When using a ladder, always make sure you choose the right ladder for the right job. Before using the ladder, make sure it is in good condition. Check the ropes, check for any dents, and make sure the feet of the ladder are not worn or damaged in any way. If ladders are exposed to any oil or grease, make sure it is removed before using. Any ladders having defects should be taken out of service immediately, not used again until repaired. When using the ladder, the proper way to set it up is at an angle. This angle must use a distance from the vertical wall equal to 1/4 the working length of the ladder as demonstrated in this image. When going up and down the ladder, always face the ladder and never turn around to go up or down. Always have your belt buckle in the middle of the ladder. Never reach beyond the ladder vertically or horizontally, as this could result in serious injury or death. Safety requirements for scaffolding. This section covers general requirements, inspections, and work conditions. Other working surfaces. This section covers dock boards and bridge plates, forging machine area, and veneer machinery. Next, we will discuss means of egress, or also known as evacuation. Design and construction requirements for exit routes. Exit routes must be permanent and must be separated by fire-resistant materials. The building must have at least 1 hour fire-rated materials. The doors must also be self-closing as to prevent any inside fire or hazard from escaping to the outside. The exit must also be limited and only those necessary to reach the exit discharge. Exit routes also need to be 28 inches wide and 7 feet 6 inches tall. It is important that exit doors remain unlocked at all times. Powered platforms, man lifts, and vehicle-mounted work platforms. If your facility is regulated under this regulation, you will be trained at a later time. Powered platforms for building maintenance. If your facility is regulated under this regulation, you will be trained at a later time. Vehicle-mounted elevating and rotating platforms. If your facility is regulated under this regulation, you will be trained at a later time. Man lifts. This regulation applies to the construction, maintenance, inspection, and operation of man lifts in relation to accident hazards. Man lifts covered by this section consist of platforms or brackets and accompanying handholds mounted on or attached to an endless belt operating vertically in one direction only and being supported by and driven through pulleys at the top and bottom. This section applies to man lifts used to carry only personnel trained and authorized by the employer in their use. If your job requires operation of a man lift, further training will be required. Occupational health and environmental control. If your facility is regulated under this regulation, you will be trained at a later time. Occupational noise exposure. OSHA's action level for establishing a hearing conservation program is 85 decibels. If a noise survey is completed and the area being tested comes in over 85 decibels, your facility will be required to start a hearing conservation program that will involve a baseline audiogram so subsequent audiograms can be compared. A training program will need to be established as well. If it is found that the area being tested has 95 decibels or more, engineering controls on hearing protection will need to be initiated. Hazardous materials subpart H goes over the following: acetylene, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrous oxide, flammable liquids, spray finishing with flammable or combustible liquids, explosive and blasting agents, storage of liquefied petroleum gas, storage of anhydrous ammonia, and dipping and coating operations. Compressed gas. Compressed gas has many hazards such as asphyxiation, poisoning, projectile, fire, and anesthetic effects. It is important to know which flammable gas you are working with. Flammable compressed gas must be 20 feet or more away from combustible compressed gas, for example oxygen, or separated by a 5-foot wall with at least a 1/2 hour rated wall. Flammable liquids. There are 4 types of flammable liquids. You will receive further training on 4 kinds of flammable liquids at a different time. Spray finishing using flammable and combustible materials. Separation of operations, cleaning, minimum separation of flame or spark producing equipment, portable fire extinguishers, and no smoking signs. You will be trained on this regulation at a later time. Storage and handling liquefied petroleum. No more than 2 liquid petroleum gas containers per truck. No parking of truck in areas of excessive heat or next to sources of ignition. Storage of containers shall not exceed 10,000 pounds in special buildings of rooms, walls, floors, or ceilings constructed of materials. Dipping and coating operations. Clean an object, coat an object, alter the surface of an object, change the character of an object. Also applies to the draining or drying of an object you have dipped or coated. Examples of covered operations are paint dipping, electroplating, pickling, quenching, tanning, degreasing, stripping, cleaning, roll coating, flow coating, and curtain coating. More in-depth training will be provided alerted of requirements to stay compliant with this regulation. Personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment must be provided by the employer at no cost to the employee. It must fit and all employees must be trained on how to use it properly. PPE Job Hazard Assessments. In order to know which PPE is required, you must know what your hazards are in the workplace. These assessments are done by completing a job hazard analysis to locate what parts of your body are at risk of injury in both physical and health. It is important that workplaces try to utilize engineering controls first before relying solely on PPE. PPE, eye and face. The employer shall ensure that each affected employee uses appropriate eye or face protection when exposed to eye or face hazards from flying particles, molten metal, liquid chemicals, acids or caustic liquids, chemical gases or vapors, or potentially injurious light radiation. If an employee uses prescription lenses, it is important that they have eye protection that fits over their normal prescription glasses or works in conjunction with their prescription. For impact hazards, you will want to use face shields, goggles, or spectacles. Eye protection has limitations, and you must know your hazards and what works best with each type of eye protection. PPE respiratory protection. Respiratory protection protects your lungs and health from various types of air contaminants. Before you begin wearing your respiratory protection, you must be fit tested. Fit testing is required, and it goes through a series of steps to ensure that the PPE you are wearing fits your face and you are able to breathe and move comfortably. No facial hair should be in the way of the protection as it affects the mask you are wearing. PPE head protection. Head protection is required when there is a chance of any object falling from above. There are different types of head protection, and you must know your work environment to choose the right one. Class C does not protect against electrical. Type 1, impact from the top. Type 2, impact off-center or top. Class G protects against low voltage, and Class E protects against high voltage. Hard hat types. Choosing the correct hard hat is based on what job you are performing. PPE foot protection. The employer shall ensure that each affected employee uses protective footwear when working in areas where there is a danger of foot injuries due to falling or rolling objects or objects piercing the sole, and where such employees' feet are exposed to electrical hazards. Steel-toed boots are limited in that it does not protect the metatarsals on your foot. PPE hand protection. Employers shall select and require employees use appropriate hand protection when employees' hands are exposed to hazards such as those from skin absorption of harmful substances, severe cuts or lacerations, severe abrasions, punctures, chemical burns, thermal burns, and harmful temperature extremes. Further training will be provided on the types of gloves that are appropriate for your particular job. PPE hearing protection. While hearing protection is not listed under this subpart, since it is still a form of PPE, we will discuss it here. General environmental controls. All places of employment shall be kept clean and sanitary to the extent that the nature of the work allows. The floor of every workroom shall be maintained so far as practical in dry condition. Where wet processes are used, drainage shall be provided. To facilitate cleaning, every floor, working place, and passageway shall be kept free from protruding nails, splinters, loose boards, and unnecessary holes and openings. Color coding for physical hazards. Throughout the workplace, hazards must be identified using a color scheme. The colors you will see in a workplace are red and yellow. Red in the workplace should be anything considered for fire protection or danger. This color goes on things such as safety cans filled with flammable liquid or fire extinguishers. Red is also for stop, such as buttons on machines where a stop button is needed. Yellow is the color used for caution. Yellow is to be used where there are hazards such as falling, tripping, or the possibility of striking against something. Specifications for accidents and prevention signs. In the workplace, there are also many signs. The use of danger signs should notify employees that there is an immediate danger and the precaution should take place in the area of that sign. Caution signs should be used as a warning to potential hazards. The signs you see should have blunt corners and kept free of any hazards. Danger signs should be red, black, and white, while caution signs are yellow and black. Any safety instruction signs should be green and white. Permit required confined space. A confined space is somewhere that is large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work. A confined space has a restricted means of entry or exit and is not designed for continual employee occupancy. A permit required confined space is anywhere that has potential for a hazardous atmosphere, contains material that has potential to engulf an entrant, has an internal configuration where a person could become asphyxiated, or contains any other recognized serious health hazards. Control of hazardous energy. This covers the servicing and maintenance of machines and equipment in which the unexpected energization or startup of the machines or equipment or release of stored energy could harm employees. This standard establishes minimum performance requirements for the control of such hazardous energy. Each individual machine that falls into this category will need procedures and training on following appropriate steps to ensure equipment is properly locked and tagged when being serviced. Medical and first aid. Your employer shall ensure the ready availability of medical personnel for advice and consultation on matters of plant health. The primary requirement addressed by these standards is that an employer must ensure prompt first aid treatment for injured employees, either by providing for the availability of a trained first aid provider at the worksite or by ensuring that emergency treatment services are within reasonable proximity of the worksite. The basic purpose of these standards is to ensure that adequate first aid is available in the critical minutes between the occurrence of an injury and the availability of a physician or hospital care for the injured employee. In the absence of an infirmary, clinic, hospital, or physician that is reasonably accessible in terms of time and distance to the worksite, which is available for the treatment of injured employees, a person who has a valid certificate in first aid training from the U.S. Bureau of Mines, the American Red Cross, or equivalent training that can be verified by documentary evidence shall be available at the worksite to render first aid. Fire protection. Section 155 through 156 applies to facilities that have fire brigades. If you are required to have a fire brigade, you'll be trained at another time. Portable fire extinguishers. The different types of fire extinguishers are A, B, C, and D. A fire extinguishers protect against combustibles, which are items such as paper and wood. These types of fire extinguishers need to be separated every 75 feet. Class B fire extinguishers fight against flammable liquids such as gasoline, paint remover, or grease. Class B fire extinguishers should be distributed every 50 feet. Class C is used to fight against electrical fires. Never attempt to put out an electrical fire with water or any other fire extinguisher except Class C. Class D is used against combustible metals found in all types of industries. They should be distributed every 75 feet. Training for fire extinguishers should occur annually. Fire extinguishers must always be easily accessible. Class K fire extinguishers are used to fight cooking oils or animal fats. The acronym used for using a fire extinguisher is known as PASS. It stands for Pull, Aim, Squeeze, and Sweep. You pull the pin located at the top of the fire extinguisher, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the trigger, and then sweep from side to side. Remember that fire extinguishers are not meant to put out large fires. If you are in the situation where there is a large fire, use a fire extinguisher as a means of providing an exit. Fire extinguishers should be inspected monthly and annually. For the monthly inspection, you will check to make sure that the fire extinguisher is fully pressurized and in good condition. Check for any defects in the hose or the metal such as cuts or dents. Make sure the pin is still intact. After you are done inspecting, sign off on the maintenance record tag. Anytime the fire extinguisher is used, it needs to be taken out of service to be recharged and inspected by an outside company. The annual inspection is from an outside source that recharges and inspects. Material handling and storage. Where chemical handling equipment is used, sufficient safe clearances shall be allowed for aisles, at loading docks, through doorways, and wherever turns or passages must be made. Aisles and passageways shall be kept clear and in good repair with no obstructions across or in aisles that could create a hazard. Permanent aisles and passageways shall be appropriately marked. Storage of materials shall not create a hazard. Bags, containers, bundles, etc. stored in tiers shall be stacked, blocked, interlocked, and limited in height so that they are stable and secure against sliding or collapse. Storage areas shall be kept free from accumulation of materials that constitute hazards from tripping, fire, explosion, or pest harborage. Vegetation control will be exercised when necessary. Powered industrial trucks. Forklifts must be constructed in accordance with ANSI standards and have a label or other identifying mark stating so. No modifications to the forklift that affect its operation may be done without manufacturer approval. An employee must be trained before they can drive a forklift or industrial truck in the workplace. Refresher training is needed before then if an unsafe behavior is observed, there is a near miss, or an accident occurs. There are 11 different designations for forklift. These represent the type of environment your forklift can be in. You should also always know your forklift's weight capacity. If your facility has forklifts, you will receive further training on them. Overhead and gantry cranes. This regulation applies to overhead and gantry cranes including semi-gantry, cantilever gantry, wall cranes, storage bridge cranes, and others having the same fundamental characteristics. If your facility has any cranes, you will receive further training regarding operations and inspections. Machinery and machine guarding. One or more methods of machine guarding shall be provided to protect the operator and other employees in the machine areas from hazards such as those created by point of operation, ingoing nip points, rotating parts, flying chips, and sparks. Woodworking machinery. Woodworking machinery, abrasive wheel machinery, and mechanical power presses. Further training will be provided on the specific types of guarding requirements per machine you are working with when you are out on the work floor. Hand and portable power tools and other handheld equipment. Compressed air for cleaning should be limited to a 30 psi output on the air nozzle being used. All electrical cords attached to hand portable power tools should be in good condition with no frays and be a 3-pronged plug for proper grounding capabilities. It is a policy of this company to keep all guards on all hand tools at all times to prevent employee injury. Welding, cutting, and brazing. Under welding, cutting, and brazing, any operations involving resistance welding employees will receive further in-depth training on proper handling and operating procedures. Electrical. This section covers Subpart S, extension cords, electrical cords, panels, marked, holes, 36 clearance distance, and fire hazards. Toxic and hazardous substances. Specific training under your hazard communications program will be provided for any and all chemicals that you may have come in contact with while performing your specific job duties. Air contaminants. Job hazard assessments will be performed to determine what PPE may be required to prevent overexposure to air contaminants. Air sampling may also be required to determine exposure levels in any given workplace area. Carcinogens. This is the list of carcinogens regulated by OSHA. If these are present in your workplace, you will be trained at a later time. Access to employee exposure and medical records. This regulation applies to each general industry employer who makes, maintains, contracts for, or who has access to employee exposure or medical records or analysis thereof pertaining to employees exposed to toxic substances or harmful physical agents. Your records under this will be kept confidential and you will have access to them whenever it is needed. Lead. Air monitoring will need to be performed to determine exposure levels to lead. Chromium. Air monitoring will need to be performed to determine exposure levels to hexavalent chromium-6. Bloodborne pathogens. A bloodborne pathogens program and training is required for all employees who could reasonably anticipate coming into contact with blood and other potential infectious materials are covered under this standard. Due to the work being performed in your facility, first responders and custodial staff will need to be considered for being aware of the facility's exposure control plan and training under such procedures. Hazard communications. SDS stands for Save the Data Sheet. This contains all the information about the chemicals in your workplace. It contains the hazard identification, ingredients, first aid measures, firefighting measures, accidental release measures, handling and storage, exposure controls and PPE, physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity, toxicological information, disposal considerations, transport information, and regulatory information. Your employer is required to have every SDS at your facility's location for every chemical present in the workplace. The facility should also have a master chemical list of all chemicals on site. Training is required for every employee. Refresher training is needed whenever a new chemical hazard is introduced into the workplace. Every chemical needs to be labeled. This is an NFPA label. Blue is for health, red is for flammable, yellow is for reactivity, and white is for special. Heat stress. Being overheated can cause you to become dehydrated, causing you to lose concentration and become sick. It can result in stroke and sometimes death. Working outdoors in high temperatures or even physical exertion can lead to heat stress. Preventing this can be done by drinking water regularly and keeping cool through air conditioning and cycles. Tornado Action Plan. When identifying shelter locations, make sure that where you choose is away from doors, windows, and outside walls. Small interior rooms or hallways are most suitable, while cafeterias or auditoriums should not be used. A basement or underground shelter is most suitable, if caught outside and not within a walking distance or drive-in vehicle. Alarm systems or radios should be tested frequently, and training should be done so employees know procedures and what to do in case of emergency, as well as role-taking procedures. Workplace violence. Workplace violence is any form of verbal or physical threats, acts, and intimidation. Nearly 2 million American workers have reported workplace violence each year. This disrupts the workplace and the environments around you. This can be reduced by following zero-tolerance policies, assessing the worksite and likelihood of violence occurring, and communicating with employees the policies.